Today in the big stadium, we have some baseball players to beat up, and he hurt his hand too, are you kidding me? If you remember the football player that was here when football players are in the big stadium, he hurt his hand too, so seems like it's the fashionable thing to do in Nimbasa if you're an athlete. Break your hand! So, while we beat this guy up, something that I wanted to talk about in the last video, but I didn't have the time to, is that from this point of the game on, and I'm not talking about if you go back to previous areas, but we reached the point in the game where when we get some shaking grass, we can get a new Pokemon, which is Emolga. I think just about everyone remembers what Emolga is. It's very, very famous because of a certain fight in this game, which is coming up very, very soon. But, yeah, Emolga, overall, not a very good Pokemon. It's the mandatory electric type that doesn't evolve mascot sort of thing, like Plusle, Minun, Pachirisu. Before release, it was thought to maybe be an evolution of Pachirisu, but it turned out not to be the case, obviously. And it's probably the best of the bunch, because it at least has some pretty good speed, and I guess average attack stats. I wouldn't call them good, but its offense is, well, by the standards of that particular category of that Pokemon, it's pretty workable. It gets even better because it just got Motor Drive lately with Black and White 2. But otherwise, yeah, not a very good Pokemon that I would recommend to anyone, especially since it's stuck in the same typing as Zapdos and Thundurus. So, yeah, the day is starting very, very badly for Emolga. Doesn't have much of a chance, and it only exists so that you can see that, well, you failed getting an Audino for experience, so you get that piece of crap Emolga that doesn't really give all that much. So I guess the only reason why you would ever want to see an Emolga is if you want the Pokédex entry, but otherwise, don't really bother with it. Well, I guess in Conquest it's pretty decent because, well, floating Pokemon are at a natural advantage. They aren't affected at all by terrain, which helps a great deal. Volt Switch is very, very strong. I almost got destroyed by an Emolga in a defense of the Avia Kingdom a few days ago. So, yeah, I'm not really in a mood to bash Emolga as far as Conquest goes. But in this game, nah, it's just not worth it, even though, as I said, it's better than the likes of Plusle or Minun or Pachirisu. So, I guess we are all done in the big stadium, so we can head over in the small courts, where tennis is going on right now, tennis practices. I tried recording a bit earlier today, but there was a match going on, again. So I said, you know, fuck this, I'm just going to wait for a few hours for the match to end, then I'm going to be able to get in and actually enter the small court with the tennis players. Also, I mentioned in the last video that you could get a Zoroark in the Lost Lorn Forest if you had one of the shiny legendary dogs from the movie 13 promotions. Well, I didn't get to talk much about Zoroark because I didn't have the time, but Zoroark is most famous for its ability, which is Illusion. Unfortunately, well, some people really like it, but I don't. I guess it's sort of down to taste, but I find it not effective enough for my taste. The way it works is that Zoroark, when it enters the field, it's going to copy the last Pokemon that's in your team, and if your last Pokemon is dead, it's going to copy the second to last, and so on and so forth. Now the problem with Zoroark, as far as Illusion goes, is that, well, you can't really mimic a Pokemon that is immune to spikes or toxic spikes, or that isn't hit for neutral by Stealth Rock, because otherwise, if you're playing a good player, and it's always best to assume that you're going to be playing a good player, don't assume that your opponent is a wuss, otherwise you're probably going to get your ass kicked. But yeah, there's really not a whole lot you can do with Illusion. It sounds cool in theory, but in practice it's pretty easy to be found out. So now that I'm done here, I'm going to head over to Route 5, which is the route that leads to the next city. Unfortunately, we can't get to that city quite yet because there's a drawbridge on the way that's raised, but nonetheless, we're going to head over there and get some quick training done before the gym. So Route 5, Performer Street. There are a lot of performers on this route, as the name implies. Now, in there, you want to talk to this NPC because remember when I said earlier on that there were NPCs who could take items off your hands, you know, items that whose only purpose is to be sold. Well, this is the first of these NPCs, and she collects mushrooms. So I think I have a ball mushroom, so I'm gonna hand it over. Let's see. No, I'm not in the right pocket here. Oh, I have a big mushroom. Didn't really remember that, but let's give the big mushroom, and she's going to pay twice the usual amount for that big mushroom. So you want to hang on to these items, not sell them in Pokemon centers. You want to hold out for these NPCs. Now, I got 5,000 for that big mushroom, so if I can find that ball mushroom that I was talking about earlier, here we go. How much am I going to get? 25,000? That is a lot. Unfortunately, I think there's a finite amount of ball mushrooms in the game, and by that I mean 1 or 2, so yeah, 500 for the tiny mushroom. The usual price is 250. But yeah, if you ever find mushrooms, you want to come here and sell them to her for some extra money. So just going to sell these tiny mushrooms real quick. After that, we're going to move on with Route 5 proper and the trainers that are found on it. So, now that we're done, I can get back to what I was talking about before. Yeah, another problem with Illusion is that you can't switch Zoroark in on an offensive attack because the illusion is broke by any offensive attack. So, you switch into an offensive attack and your illusion's broken already, which is not good. And she's got 3 Pokemon, and the first one is a Panseer. This doesn't look good. If you ask me, this probably means that she's got all 3 elemental monkeys. Yep. So basically, we're 7 minutes into this video, and already we have encountered 2 trainers who both have all 3 elemental monkeys. So when I said that elemental monkeys are incredibly common for NPC trainers in this game, I was not kidding. And this is the point where you really start to get tired of seeing them all the time. So, yeah, back to Illusion. I was saying I don't really like it. I do admit it can save your bacon if used properly. Of course, I don't really recommend using a Pokemon that shares a weakness with Zoroark as your illusion either, because N has a Zoroark at the end of the game, and he's got a Klinklang as his last team member. And the first time I played this, I saw, oh hey, a Klinklang! I'm gonna send out Mienshao and use High Jump Kick on it. Well, guess what? It was a Zoroark, and it was still super effective. So, not a very good idea. You really gotta pick your Pokemon very carefully for the illusion. But otherwise, besides illusion, Zoroark is a fairly interesting Pokemon. Its defenses are pathetic, but fortunately it's got very good special attack, and it's quite fast as well, which is good. It's a fairly potent special attacker, but personally, well, I understand that it's underused, and also it's probably the best choice in that tier if you want a special sweeping dark type. But if you're playing overused, then personally, I would pick Hydreigon every time. It's just so much better, even though it's a wee bit slower, which matters because Hydreigon is in the double digits and Zoroark is in the triple digits. So the main reason to use it in Overused is because of Illusion, which, as I said before, I don't like very much. I understand that it has some merits, and other better players can get much more out of Illusion than I can, but I just don't really like Illusion very much, to be perfectly honest with you. And on another subject, I was talking about Garbodor's typing in the last video, Mono Poison. Something that I noticed on the Smogon analysis that made me smile is that they say that Garbodor has a good defensive typing, but Mach has a bad defensive typing. Go read the analysis, I swear, it's there. And yeah, they have the exact same typing, so what gives? Heck, Mach is even bulkier than Garbodor, so what? Personally, I think Mono Poison, it's probably the worst typing possible offensively. Maybe Mono Normal is worst, but it's debatable. But defensively, Mono Poison isn't all that bad because Poison has a lot of interesting resistances at the cost of weaknesses to Psychic, which isn't really used all that much, and Ground, which is a very common type, unfortunately. But yeah, the drawbridge is raised. As I said before, we can't do anything about that quite yet. Clay, we can't really get to him because he's on the other side of the bridge, as I was saying. So if I talk to Elisa, she might be able to do something. So this is a subtle cue that you need to beat Elisa before you'll be able to move on to this bridge. Something else that I wanted to talk about, and that's on my backlog of subjects to talk about while I have the time. Seasons! We've already seen the seasons change several times throughout this LP. Well, actually more like twice, but still. What seasons do? Well, you probably noticed some cosmetic changes. The grass and trees look different depending on the seasons. But oh, come on! I hate when that happens. And Tortuga is sent out. I'm going to try and bring out Excadrill back, see what's going to happen. But yeah, we haven't reached the point where we're really going to see what seasons really do. One noticeable effect is that, when you encounter a Deerling and or a Sawsbuck in the wild, and these are Pokemon that we have yet to meet, but when you meet them in the wild, their appearance is going to change depending on the season where you first met them. And there's going to be a little side quest later on that requires you to catch one of each kind of Deerling so that you can get... I don't really remember what the reward is. I'm going to go look it up and maybe decide if it's worth doing the side quest or not for this LP. But anyway, possibly the most noticeable effect that seasons have is that in certain areas the Pokemon that you can meet change depending on the seasons, especially in winter. The areas where this happens is, well, just about everything between Driftvale City and Route 8, which is located next to Icirus City. So most of the most western part of Unova, the Pokemon are going to change slightly depending on the seasons. And the general area of Icirus City and Twist Mountain as well is going to change radically depending on whether it's winter or not, because there are going to be snowbanks that are going to allow you to reach places that you couldn't reach before, for example. And you can also basically just shortcut your way through Twist Mountain if you're fortunate enough to be in winter when you get there, which won't be the case in this LP, so I will have to show that to you at a much later point. And there are also a lot more minor things that can or can't be done depending on the seasons. For example, the Castelia cones in Castelia City can't be bought in the winter, because seriously, who buys ice cream in the winter? That's just inappropriate. But yeah, I will explain these occurrences as they happen. And the seasons, as you might have noticed, don't match the seasons in real life. That's because seasons only last 1 month in this game. In order to, if you want a Pokemon that's only in winter, for example, so you don't have to wait 9 months while you're in spring to get to that without manipulating the DS's clock or something like that. So this is pretty much the reason why they did that. Because I really admit that it would suck if the only way to get a Pokemon within 9 months was to traffic the clock on your DS. Even waiting 3 months at times can be sort of aggravating, so imagine 9. And I got an electric guitar. Unfortunately, it doesn't do much because it's a musical prop. So this one will be a gift that I won't be using ever! I mean, at least give me the Thunderbolt TM instead.